Today on LA Currents, from model fire engines to badges and helmets, there's a hidden gem in the heart of Hollywood that houses a prominent collection of Los Angeles Fire Department gear, equipment, and history. Next, we get some useful advice from two emergency specialists on how to design a game plan to protect and prepare for a tsunami in Los Angeles. But first, we catch up with Brenda Barnett of LA Animal Services. Since Los Angeles was recently recognized for their efforts towards being a no-kill shelter, we talk with Brenda about this achievement and the coalition of other animal welfare organizations that make it possible. Despite the struggles of the pandemic, the city of Los Angeles shelters reached a milestone this year by achieving a no-kill status in 2020. How did that happen?
Well, it was sort of magical, actually, and the city's not really going to call ourselves a no-kill city yet, because it was a different year, but we did achieve the 90.49 life save rate, which under normal circumstances would be considered no-kill. So we wanted to celebrate anyway all of the people who made that possible. I mean, everything from our national friends like Best Friends has been quite a champion, ASPCA has been wonderful, and then we've got New Hope Partners, rescues who pull animals, adopters, foster volunteers, nearly 3,000 volunteers that just help us. Sure. And then there are people in the streets who do things to help animals that never even meet our radar because they're just out there doing their thing and they're not part of the system. So it really has been a whole village effort, and there have been people here much longer than me who have been working on trying to achieve this, and we wanted to celebrate them this year.
All right, as strange as this question is, did the pandemic help? Because it seemed like absolutely everybody adopted a dog or a pet for comfort, company, and exercise, and our whole safer at home, and then can't do anything except maybe go hiking and walking around the neighborhood. Was there a huge influx of adoptions? Well,
there was a big influx of adoptions and people who wanted to foster pets. At one point, we actually ran out of foster pets, and we had to wait until some more came in before we could give them foster pets to take care of. So I think, but what I think is the most remarkable about it is the return rates. Our return rates for dogs who were adopted or cats who were adopted during that time is lower than it's been in the past. So not only did they adopt them, they kept them. They fell in love with them, and probably, if I were to guess, I would say, okay, you're at home with them all day. I know where my dogs were all day. They were circled. I was, working mostly from Zoom and on the computer, and my dogs were always in the room with me, occasionally making a little appearance in a Zoom meeting, invited or not. But they were there with us. And so, it gave people time to let them adjust to their new surroundings and their new lifestyle, and they didn't bring them back. So it was a win-win for the animals, for sure.
So the no-kill rate at 90%, 90 point what?
49.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's obviously a leeway in that, in which there are circumstances in which an animal has to be put down. So what are those things that are the predominant reasons why an animal can't be?
It's a good question, and it's been a number of years since we have run out of space and had to euthanize anything for lack of space in the shelters, which is really wonderful. So now when you look at those that were euthanized, they were ones that were medically challenged, seriously medically challenged, like irrevocable suffering, so that they're really just keeping them alive might have been questionable, and the veterinarians would feel that it was more humane to go ahead and euthanize them. And then the others, when we have hearings about dangerous dogs, if a dog is declared dangerous, we're required to euthanize that animal. And all those numbers are included in our numbers, so we don't say, well, because it was a court order to euthanize, we take them out of our numbers. We don't do it that way. We just leave them in. And then there are other animals that come in that people turn them in because they've bitten a family member, or they've done something, or there's, they just feel like they can't handle them. We will offer those first to our rescue partners because some of the rescue partners have trainers that work with them. They have experienced foster homes that will take a dog like that and work with it. It's not something we're really equipped to do in a shelter environment.
Sure.
So if we can't find someone who can take that dog and work with it, and if we think it's too dangerous to release to the public, we will humanely euthanize them.
I imagine, especially in a shelter environment, might exacerbate a scenario because the animals are in a confined space, etc. But you just made me think of something. When you have an animal, cat, dog, horse, bunny, whatever, brought to the shelter for adoption, how do you learn the temperament of the animal so that you can very comfortably say to whomever comes in, don't put this in a house with other animals, this animal is fine around children? I mean, what's the process of vetting a shelter animal so that you are feeling comfortable with an adoption?
Yeah, you're full of good questions.
Oh, good.
It is. Because, you know, a lot of it has to do with the interview process if it's an owner surrender.
Sure.
So that we can get a lot of information. Some people might gild the lily a little bit and might not tell you everything you want to know, but our staff is pretty experienced in saying, well, what about if it's this way or that way, and so they can get as much information as they can. And then some of it is by handling and just working with them while they're in the shelter, the staff and the volunteers. You know, we're doing something in the shelters now that I think is really exciting. All of our staff and all of our volunteers are taking a fear-free shelter class. Now, that doesn't mean so that people won't be afraid. That's accepting the fact that when an animal comes into the shelter, they've never been there before. It sounds different, it looks different, it feels different. So the animals are likely going to be afraid in the beginning. So we try to do things just to calm them down and let them relax. And one of those is just, you know, playing with them, giving them treats, welcoming them, giving them something to sleep on. So until they do settle down. And a lot of shelters don't really start examining dogs for temperament until they've been there for a while. And, you know, been there 2 or 3 days, had a chance to relax, and then you can sort of see who that is. But, you know, I'm very proud of our staff and our volunteers for taking this class so they'll know how to welcome animals into the shelter, how to make them feel not fearful and to feel like they're safe and they're okay. And we can't really tell them they're there temporarily, but if we get them out into a foster home or a home of their own quickly, then they're not set back by being sheltered for a long period of time.
Okay, myth or fact? I was told at one point in time that when an animal is surrendered and then adopted again, that it has an even stronger attachment to its adopted family.
Yeah, that I could believe that, and it might depend on the particular dog, you know, whether or not it's a dog's dog or a people dog. But I could see that. I think I've heard that too, that they're just so grateful to be in a home and to be rescued, and that they make amazing pets. The other thing about getting one that's already been in a home, chances are pretty good. There's some house training, there's some manners that have been taught, and there might be a couple bad habits that you have to break too, but you start with a dog who already knows some things. And as much as I love puppies and as cute as they are, they can be a lot of work.
I was going to say, yeah. The advantages of an older animal over, you know, a darling little thing, because all small anybody's are cute. I mean,
exactly.
But they require an enormous amount of energy and effort. So definitely consider older animals when adopting. Because they're not. So along those lines of keeping animals out of shelters, there's a lot of, you know, technology has really helped. A lot of programs, like you said, you're incorporating into the LA shelters. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you have found really work in regards to keeping animals out of shelters in the first place?
Neighbors helping neighbors. If a dog is out, or a cat in a safe neighborhood, and it's just sort of wandering around, maybe got out the gate or out the back door, if neighbors put it on one of those neighborhood watches, they're probably going to get home a lot faster. Mm-hmm. So they get home much faster. If you pick up a dog and you think, because you think it's lost, and it is if you don't see a person attached to it, and you drive it across town to a shelter, chances are the owner's going to look that neighborhood, search the neighborhood, put signs up in the neighborhood. It's going to take them a few days to think about where the dog might be and to start checking the shelters. And sometimes people wait so long to check the shelters that they've passed the stray hole period and the dog has already been adopted out. Right. So when people help people, neighbors help neighbors, I think that's really the best.
Great to talk to you, Brenda.
Thanks. Nice to see you again.
The Los Angeles Fire Department Museum is here to educate, celebrate, and preserve the roots of those who serve. We chat with retired LAFD Captain Jim Finn and take a trip through the impressive display of firefighting artifacts. The LA Fire Department became a paid career employment opportunity in February of 1886. Back then, they would go for days, weeks without a fire. Well, lots has changed since then, but celebrating the rich history of the LA Fire Department. I'm delighted to be here at the LA Fire Department Museum, and I am joined by the president of the LA Fire Department Historical Society, retired Captain Jim Finn. Nice to have you with me today.
Thank you, Maria.
And nice to be in such an incredibly rich environment. Well, it's now packed in here.
Yes.
With such an incredible array. So what are some of the most interesting elements that you've been able to glean and bring in here that would fascinate even people who don't know about the fire department?
Well, actually the earliest of our apparatus is a Hayes aerial, and it's from the early 1880s. This aerial ladder that was much improved over what they were using. We have one of the very few, if not the only, existing Hayes aerial left in the world. The steamer that's sitting right behind you is from 1887, the LA Fire Department. That was one of our earliest purchases when we became a paid department.
There's the what, that's visually fascinating, the stories are interesting, the people involved, have a long and interesting story to tell. So there's the what, but there's the why. Why is this place here, and why is it important for, us to know that it's here, and, why should we think about all of these stories and understand the history of the LA Fire Department?
Well, history is obviously very important in whatever walk of life you're in, or just life itself. If you don't know where you're coming from or where you've been, then you really don't know where you're going. And it's kind of funny how this job in particular, the more things change, the more they're the same, it seems like.
Firefighters don't just fight fires. I mean, there's a broad range of what they are asked to do, required to do. I mean, there's literally an ambulance over your shoulder that I can see myself. So, what's the scope of a firefighter's life, and how is that reflected in this museum?
Well, pretty much everything. And especially on the weekends. No other city agencies not very many of them are open on the weekends, and so people call who's open, and we're open, and we go to see if there's, if it's something that we can take care of. And if it is, we take care of it. If it's not, we try and get help for them, whatever they need. So.
And you can see that in here, I would imagine, in all these different things. I mean, the different utilitarian and emotional purposes of all these items.
And a lot of these items that you see in here are the result of something that somebody has responded to, some firefighter has responded to, and they didn't have what they needed to properly take care of it, and so they designed and built it. And we have a lot of tools that are actually named after firefighters. Blake four-way valve and Schultz shut-off, those are named after LA firefighters that designed these things for us to use.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
How does one go from being a firefighter who needs something to creating that something to actually getting it named after them? I mean, is literally there a process?
No, there's not a process,
Okay.
and they don't always get named after
Where's the
them.
Jim Finn of things?
Yeah, we don't have that.
There's also a fun element. You can actually have a party here.
We do, and we tried kids' birthday parties, but those did not work for us. But we have had other events here. We've had retirement dinners for firefighters. We've had weddings, both upstairs and out in front. Mm-hmm. And we've had memorial. Well, we have our own memorial service every year to honor the firefighters that are on that wall and the people that have died during the year.
Right.
But we've also had memorial services here for an individual member that has passed away, and that's where they want to have the service to honor them.
There's also a very poignant part of this facility that memorializes officers who have fallen in the line of duty, which
Right.
is an incredibly important part of, honoring their career and their dedication and their sacrifice. The memorial wall is a very dynamic part of this.
Yeah, back in 2000, we weren't even open yet, but we knew we were coming in here.
Right.
And our fire chief's wife, Liz Bamatri, was the prime mover behind the memorial. We'd been, a fire department at that time for 114 years and had no memorial for fallen firefighters. Every year we had a memorial service, but it was held on the south lawn of City Hall at the Cenotaph, which was there to honor LA firefighters that went to fight in World War II. Mm-hmm. There's no names or anything on this, it's just something that was put there back in 1944 to honor them. Mm-hmm. So we needed an appropriate place to honor those people, and so it was through her input, and I mentioned Tom LaBonge earlier. He was part of that group also, and Liz actually went back to Minnesota to have those statues made that are out there.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I think it's important. The statues really tell their own story. It's
Yeah.
a really important tribute to the type of people who become firefighters.
Right. We did something that most fire departments don't do if they have memorial statues. Most fire departments put a breathing apparatus face piece on them. So with that face piece covering them, you don't know who they are. You don't know what they look like. We wanted to do something a little different. We used 5 active firefighters to pose for those, and with 5 statues we did as much as we could to show our diversity with ethnicity and gender. And there's one thing also different about those, is that when you look at the helmets, there's 5 different numbers on the helmets. You wouldn't have a firefighting crew with 5 different numbers on their helmets. They'd be from the same station. Sure. But we were doing the same thing. We highlighted 5 different areas of the city with those station numbers. So you can see the gender, you can see the ethnicity, and then they're there in front of our memorial wall that has all of the people listed that died in the line of duty.
And a yearly honorarium for them, etc. There's also an element to this museum which I think is really important to talk about. There's an educational component. Mm-hmm. So what is the Institute and how is that utilized with the history?
Bill Rowland, who it's named for, was a benefactor of this museum. He was a retired firefighter. Sadly, last year he passed away. The Educational Center is named after him, and what we're doing is trying to teach children and adults fire and life safety.
On a personal level?
Yes.
So yeah. You don't need perhaps the assistance of a firefighter, but how to take care of yourself before professional aid arrives.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, if people want to get more information about this museum and when they can come and when it's going to be, you know, more open and it's free, which is the best part,
Right.
what's the best website?
LAFDmuseum.org.
All right. Well, Jim, this has been an ultimate delight, and this is a fascinating place, and I cannot emphasize that you need to get a lot of people in here to support everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate you coming.
Thanks. Did you know that every coastline in the world is vulnerable to tsunamis? Yvette LeDuc and Anna Burton share their operational perspectives on tsunamis and the warning signs so we can stay informed and stay safe. Think an earthquake off the coast of Alaska will have no impact on your life? Well, that may not necessarily be true. We should perhaps be prepared for a tsunami. And here to let us know the best way to do that, I'm delighted to welcome Yvette LeDuc. You are a tsunami planning coordinator for the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. So nice to have you here.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk
All right,
to you.
we're really used to getting prepared for an earthquake. I mean, that just seems to be part of our vernacular here in Southern California. But how does that differ for preparing for a tsunami?
So there are some similarities and differences in preparing for these two different types of disasters. So for both of them, we want you to have a plan. Have a plan for yourself, for your family, for your pets, and then also get prepared, have a preparedness kit, have the types of items that you would need to grab and go should you need to evacuate due to a tsunami. So in saying that, that is one of the major differences between preparing for an earthquake and preparing for a tsunami. For the earthquake, you do your drop, cover, hold on, and we want you to stay as close to where you are.
Right.
But once that shaking stops, we want you to immediately evacuate inland and to high ground if possible.
Have tsunamis hit this area, and what are the chances of a tsunami hitting this area? You know, March of 1964, huge earthquake off the coast of Alaska, did in fact impact Southern California, and in particular Crescent City, but you said even in 2011.
Correct. There was an earthquake that happened off the coast of Japan in 2011. It was the Tohoku Tsunami, which created massive inundation over in Japan. However, tsunamis can travel across the Pacific Ocean. They travel about the speed of a jet plane, so about 500 miles an hour. So think about the time it would take for you to fly from Japan to California. That's about the time it would take for the tsunami to arrive. And it actually did cause about $100 million damage to the California coast, mostly impacting Northern California. Crescent City was the most significantly damaged community from that event, but we had damage mostly to our port and harbor areas all up and down the California coast.
What are some of the ways that we will be warned that a tsunami, obviously radio emergency services, we're not like Hawaii, we don't have a siren system.
We don't hear, there are some areas of our coast that do have siren systems, like in Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, and up along our northern coast. There are some areas that do have tsunami sirens that can sound when there is a tsunami. However, for most of the coast, we don't. So if there is a near source tsunami, like we talked about earlier, if there's an earthquake off our coast here, you'll want to watch for those natural signs. The recedence of the ocean water, maybe hearing kind of a different roaring sound in the ocean. Those are some factors, or if you feel the shaking, those are some factors that you'll want to pay attention to know that you need to leave the area. They can also be generated from a landslide. For instance, in the Los Angeles area, we have the Palos Verdes Peninsula area, and there is the potential, if there is a large landslide in that area, that it could generate a local tsunami. So basically, what causes the tsunami is if a large chunk of earth, so to speak, were to drop off and cause a displacement in the water in that area, that large displacement of water could generate a tsunami that could then travel onshore and impact our coastal areas.
Wow, absolutely fascinating, Yvette. So much information. Thank you so much for being with us today and getting all this great information out. So just sit tight.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we'll talk with Anna Burton from the LA port about how a tsunami could affect our ports here in Los Angeles. One of the most important parts of Los Angeles is in fact on our shores. It's the Port of Los Angeles. How will that be affected if a tsunami comes our way, and what should we do? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Anna Burton, who is the Emergency Management Coordinator for the Port of Los Angeles. So nice to have you here. And the port is a huge part of our coast.
It absolutely is. The Port of Los Angeles, which is a dual agency complex port between Los Angeles and Long Beach, is really one of the primary economic hubs. So we're very proud of what we do.
So you're very keenly aware of what a tsunami could do to the Port of Los Angeles. So where are you in terms of preparedness, and what is done down there that might be different from just the average resident?
So I think because the port, we have connections around the world with various other ports who are very aware of the impact of a tsunami, and we plan and we train together. So one of the key things is to make sure we know who all our partners are. And the port, because of its location, its operations, we have a number of agencies that we work with on a daily basis. We're very lucky to have our Coast Guard as one of our key partners. And we work very closely with our Long Beach partners on how to prepare for a tsunami. And it's not just a tsunami as we would look for you and I, it's really operational. What would a tsunami do to the port?
Yes.
So what we do is, of course, the first thing is plan. And it's never just the plan, it's the planning process. Who do you bring in? What do you talk about? What plans do you have? When have you updated them? Who's involved? And most importantly, like we've talked about, is how do you get the messaging out? The correct message at the right time with the right information will help all of those individual agencies make their own individual decisions, which impacts how we respond together.
What's the economic impact of something happening down at the port? I mean, I know there's a lot of, because we're talking tsunamis, and there's a lot of buzz about tsunamis in this particular point in time because it's, tsunami awareness time. But there's an enormous economic impact if anything happens down at the port.
That's a huge impact, and we have a huge team at our highest executive level, Gene Soroka. We proudly put out we are open and operational on a daily basis, and if we're not, that has significant impact. But again, it depends on the month, the time, the day, and if there's damage, how quickly can we recover and get the ships moving. And it's an entire, it's that wheel of, you have the ship, you have rail, you have transit, you have the truck lines, the roadways, the bridges, the thoroughfares. Everything has to be working in a very coordinated way to make sure that we get the commerce in and out as safely as possible.
When was the last time the port was actually affected by a tsunami type event?
Well, coincidentally, we had an event in New Zealand a couple weeks ago.
Right.
And so we had noticed that there was an earthquake that they were evaluating and assessing to see if there was going to be a risk. And so with that, they collected the information, we notified all of our partners, and we maintained awareness of the data until we found out that it was not going to impact the West Coast. So we're always aware that it's a risk.
And this has been such an amazing education for me, because we were also talking about a tsunami is not a tidal wave.
It is not, and the scientists will tell you, it has nothing to do with the tides. It is a displacement of water. So as the water comes in and we rise, from the visuals that we saw in Japan many years ago, it was not a wave that came in. It was a rise in water that moved and took over the land in those inundation areas in Japan. So we want to make sure people don't look for a wave. And that's something that I really want to emphasize, is that if we hear of a tsunami, please don't go to the coast and take pictures. I mean, yes, it's interesting, it's, the Instagram and the social media, but you're putting yourself in harm's way. You might be getting in the way of those public safety resources getting to where they need to be. And if you're impeding the ability of people to safely evacuate, you're in the way and you're not doing anybody any good. So please be aware of that.
All right, so if people want more information about tsunami studies, tsunami risks, just as tsunami education, yes, and tsunami preparedness in particular, what's the best resource and what can they expect to find?
Los Angeles has the best resources available. So through our partners at USC and the Southern California Earthquake Center, we've created tsunamizone.org. So if you go to you know, that tsunamizone.org. You'll be able to find not only graphics if you wanted to create something for your own, to post it or to be aware, but there's information. There's the newly published maps that they have that will give you exactly where that inundation area is, so that we can find out where we are, what we should do, and how quickly we need to do it.
Thank you so much, Anna. This has been such a great opportunity to learn so many things that I had no clue about, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity.
All right.